this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Luis Garavito. Luis gained a nickname from the media of the Beast, and I think that's a great indication of the nature of his atrocious crimes. He is said to be one of the worst serial killers in the entire world, and it is believed that his victim count is up in the 300s range, which is absolutely shocking. He confessed to 147 crimes, and he was found guilty on 139 of those counts, which put his sentence at 1,853 years. But here's the thing, this trial took place in Colombia, where he lives, and there is a law, or was a law, which puts the maximum sentence to 30 years. He was sentenced in 1999, meaning there's really only a few years left of this sentence. He also had years taken off of his sentence because he assisted police in the search to recover some of the victims' bodies, which means that just this year, in 2023, he is eligible for parole. Okay, that's great. According to Luis himself, he committed these crimes because he had made a deal with the devil, and he explained that satanic ritual was involved in all of his crimes. In our number 9 spot today, we have William Bonin. This horrible person is said to be responsible for taking the lives of 21 young men in Southern California from May of 1979 to June of 1980. It is said that on at least 12 of these occasions he was assisted by one of his 4 known accomplices, and it is even speculated that he might be responsible for 15 more of these crimes that evidence hasn't officially been able to connect him to. He was often referred to as the freeway killer because of the fact that most of the bodies were found along the freeway of Southern California. The police surveilled William until they could catch him in the act, which they did. In the beginning, he claimed innocence, but after receiving an impassioned letter from one of the victim's mothers, which asked him to please share the location of her son's body, he confessed his guilt. But he made sure to clarify that it wasn't so the mother could be at peace and her pain could be eased. No, of course not. Instead, he said, quote, "I was dying for a hamburger and I knew if I went out with the cops, they would get me a hamburger." Right, just gonna take a moment and let that sink in. At his first trial, the prosecutor described him as, quote, "the most arch-evil person who ever existed." William was convicted on 14 of his crimes and was sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row before his sentence was carried out in 1996. In our number 8 spot today, we have Robert Hansen. Robert is often referred to as the Butcher Baker, and his story truly is horrific. He is one of the most prolific serial killers in Alaska's history because for over a decade he would kidnap women and bring them into the wilderness where he would then stalk them like prey. The reason he got away with his crimes for so long is because outside of these horrifying crimes, he was just a soft-spoken baker. Robert was heading to church by day and prowling the streets by night. What led to the downfall of this horrible monster was a badass named Cindy Paulson, who was able to escape from Robert and was sure to leave evidence behind. She then went to authorities and told them what happened, and this led to a search warrant for Robert's property, which is where all the evidence they needed lied. Robert is believed to have taken the lives of at least 17 women, and in 1983 he was sentenced to 461 years and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In our number 7 spot today, we have Vicki Dawn Jackson. Vicki was a woman who worked as a nurse for a number of years. She first got her nursing license in 1989, but it wasn't until the 2000s when things took a seriously dark turn. Between December of 2000 and February of 2001, the hospital that Vicki was working for recorded a number of deaths that was unusual. It was a much higher amount. Most of these patients were in the age range of 60 to 100 years old. Of course, people just chalked this up to the advanced age of most of these patients, but a rumor began to spread that someone might actually be responsible. After this, the hospital's administrator noticed that a vial of a drug called Mevacron had gone missing. You might see where I'm going with this. As it turns out, the person responsible was Nurse Vicki, and she had at least 10 patients whose lives she took by giving them too much of this missing. It was a muscle relaxant. Take in that this is 10 people between December and February. That is an unbelievable amount of people in a remarkably short amount of time. You might be wondering why she took these lives, and apparently she did it when she found those people rude or, quote, too demanding. Okay? Vicki, get a different job then. I don't know. In our number 6 spot today, we have Michael Bear Carson and Susan Carson. This couple is not one that anyone would want to encounter. The stories of these two come from the 80s. They were married, and on the outside they appeared just like a happy couple of harmless hippies. We all know, though, not to judge a book by its cover, in the end they would go on to become known as the San Francisco Witch Killers. Didn't know San Francisco held so many witches. Basically, together the pair took the lives of 3 separate people between 1981 and 1983. They started off by killing their roommate, who Susan claimed was a witch, and said that she was stealing her quote health, power, and beauty. They next killed one guy that they worked with on a farm because they said that he was a demon. The final person they took the life of unfortunately picked up the pair as they were hitchhiking, and they took his life because they claimed he was a quote black witch, whatever that means. Essentially, they were just committing crimes against people that they claimed to be witches. The pair were each tried and convicted for each separate crime and are both serving sentences of 75 years to life. Neither of them have ever shown any kind of remorse for what they've done.
Number 5. Simon Levive. Number 5 for Mr. Levive. This is the funniest, it's not funny, but this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I have to mention this guy. It's quite recent, and there's a documentary about him on Netflix. It's called The Tinder Swindler. Perhaps you've seen this. I threw this on, not really sure what to expect, and I was doing some laundry. I was hooked. I had to watch this entire thing. This guy, he's wild. He would go on the dating app, he would go on Tinder, and he would talk to women. He would get to know them a bit, you know, favorite color, favorite album, boo, all that stupid stuff. But then he would convince them that he was the owner of an Israeli diamond company. He would have private jets, bottles, security, you named it. He even had a big jack dude named Peter. He had a big strong man that would just follow him around. That's how you know it's the real deal. And then he would text them out of nowhere in peril. He would say his enemies are after him, like, you know, diamond business enemies, whatever, deep stuff like that. And he sent these women pictures. He would send them photos of Peter, like big strong Peter, the security guard, injured, right? It didn't look great at all. Simon would also send voice notes saying that he was being attacked and how his enemies are after him. And then he would ask for like $20,000. And it worked. He did this with multiple women, and it worked. It was horrible. It's the worst situation you can get yourself into. At the end of the day, he only got a 15-month sentence back in 2019. Number 4, Irina Christie. Any fans of Breaking Bad here? I slept on it for far too long. It's a good time. This next one might ring a bell or two. I don't know. Irina Christie, she was a 74-year-old calculus professor from Boston, and back in 2012, she was accused of running the same type of lab that Walter White was running. She didn't do it alone either. She had her own little Jesse Pinkman to go alongside, you know? Her sidekick was her 29-year-old son, Grigory. Gotta keep it in the family, I guess. Reports from the Boston Globe detailed that a bomb squad had to go in their Somerville home, and they removed multiple hazardous material boxes, so they were just up to the worst in their own home. They were officially charged with the distribution of conspiracy to violate law and a violation in a school zone. Yeah, that's just, you can't do anything in a school zone. Especially something like this. This was all done by a 74-year-old calculus professor. Number 3, John Pyle. John Pyle is just a pile of garbage, absolutely. Now, because of the nature of his crimes, I can't get into them too, deeply on YouTube here, but let's just say that he's definitely one of the worst kinds of criminals that ever existed. On June 24th, 2016, authorities searched his home after receiving 3 tips relating to his crimes. Now, the amount of and the severity of the incriminating evidence they found during said search, it was unspeakable. He was charged then with 30 different second-degree felonies, which could ultimately bring a sentence of 450 years in prison. He was arrested the same day and posted a bail bond of $90,000, as well as surrendering his passport. Now fast forward 16 months to October 23rd, 2017. John doesn't show up for his hearing. So now we have a fugitive on the run. Now, even though he gave up his passport, it is said that he was still somehow able to board a Carnival cruise ship. A Carnival cruise ship that was bound for Mexico. So he got off the ship when it arrived, and he never reboarded, and he's now yet to be located. Number 2, the River City Ripper. We talked about Jack the Ripper numerous times on this channel. Well, there's another one. Everyone's got to have cool nicknames like they're wrestlers or DC villains. This is so cringe. Well, this serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 of which were fatal. These crimes took place between August 2020 and April 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and then being able to provide a description of the assailant, there's still little to go on in terms of being able to actually identify this horrible human being. That's why I wanted to include it, because I'm like, hey, hopefully, never know. Least I can do. The FBI was contacted shortly after said survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created this profile of this unidentified killer. Now these crimes were all just random acts of violence as well that all completely occurred unprovoked. The case has gained a lot of attention, but still the monster remains at large. So look into it. I implore you to take a glance, especially if you live in the area. And finally, number 1, Belle Gunnis. We'll end on a dark one. A real dark one, of course. Originally born in Norway, Belle Gunnis moved to the United States at age 22. Gunnis then married her first husband in 1884. They owned a candy store and all was going well until a fire out of nowhere just destroyed their entire business. It even took out 2 family members. It forced them to collect life insurance, but then in 1890, Gunnis put out a life insurance policy on her husband and he ended up dying that same day. Ha! What are the odds? That's crazy. That's bizarre timing. Good thing she did that, huh? In 1892, Gunnis married her second husband, and 8 months after their wedding, he died from a skull injury and she collected his life insurance. What? That's 2 now. What's going on? I don't know. What a coincidence. Finally, in 1908, Gunnis's farm burned down, and upon investigation, 11 bodies were all found. Now, it was never officially determined whether or not Gunnis was one of those souls. She may have escaped, who knows, but that still leaves around 14 victims that she still has to answer for. Number 10, Cassie Chadwick. Also a Canadian. How could she? I'm upset right off the bat. Cassie went to the United States to pull this one off. If Canadians want any fame, they always go to the States. Even if it's fame for being a con artist. They're like, yeah, you gotta go south, bro. Gotta go to Hollywood, man. Just get out of here. I'm like, no. That's so stupid. She went to the States to convince everybody that she was the daughter of Andrew Carnegie. This was back in the early 1900s, so yeah, it worked. She convinced Cleveland banks to hand out $5 million in securities. Now keep in mind, that's a lot more than $5 million now, so sweet. Also, this was a time where women could not get bank loans in general, ever. So this was an impossible task times 2. Is it wrong of me to say I'm kind of impressed? Cassie passed away at age 50 in 1907 in the Columbus Penitentiary. Yeah, she got caught, but she got away with it for a bit, so you know. Number 9, Donald Pugh. Okay, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Donald Pugh was suspected of arson and vandalism. So police in Ohio put a photo out of his face, of course, and they asked locals to step in and help get this man off the streets. Now this was back in 2016. Now the photo that was issued to the public was this one. But Donald wasn't a fan, right? So he sent the police a better photo of himself to use. Look, Donald, the shot, yeah, I admit it's much better. Facial hair is cleaned up a bit, the shades are pretty sick, that's a great addition. Gotta protect your eyesight as you commit arson, I guess. The police department got this pic, it's just, you know, a selfie, with the message, here is a better photo. That one is terrible. So they're like, okay, thank you. Shocker, he was caught immediately. Number 8, Logan James. Not to be confused with James Logan, that's Wolverine. No, Logan James over here had actually just breached his license conditions after being released from prison on February 6, 2015. Gwent police took to Facebook to ask locals to help out, but one user in the comments section started getting a lot of upvotes, a lot of likes. It's Logan James himself commenting on the Gwent police status. What does he have to say? Let's tune in. Haha, catch me if you can, won't see me slipping. Over 40 likes, obviously, is a pretty hot comment, right? He then added, I've been walking around near home, so they're not trying too hard to catch me, lol. Yeah, James was then caught hours later near said home, and the police thanked the public again for doing their part. Thanks, Logan. Again, we couldn't have done it without you. Number 7, Adrian Klein. Apparently we can't trust funeral directors now. That's fun. I guess sleep in fear. This was recent as well. This was back in 2011 when Aspen Mortuaries had a contract embalmer. First of all, that's a pretty wild job just to pick up and go around and do. Kudos if you do that. Just a contract embalmer out there, hit that thumbs up. Nice. His name was Adrian Klein and the job was going well, I guess as well as it could be going in that specific job, until a local pawn shop delivered a tip to police saying that Klein was selling a lot of gold. A suspicious amount of gold. And considering his job, now we gotta ask a few questions, right? Was Adrian selling watches, rings, necklaces, anything like that? No, Adrian was actually selling gold teeth that he, you know, himself. Between May and November of 2011, Klein had been selling dental gold to over 17 different pawn shops and making a pretty penny because of it. That's disgusting. Imagine the smell. Like, how do you even take that to the shop without them? Let's move on. I'm gonna throw up. Number 6, Charles Ponzi. Yeah, we've all heard the term Ponzi scheme at one point or another, but what does that even mean? Who is this man? What has he done? What has he done in history? I always get him confused with the Fonz. So growing up, I was like, this Fonz character is a little sketchy. I think. I don't know. I don't watch the show. I'm far too young. A Ponzi scheme. It's a sham of an operation. Back in 1903, Charles first moved to the United States. He was an Italian immigrant who was just looking for work. Simple as that. Now, after working job after job after job, he eventually got hired at Bank Zerosi in Montreal, Canada. When the bank went bankrupt, Ponzi was screwed. He needed to do something fast. So he dabbled into smuggling and then promptly was caught. Now, after he was released, he went into the postal system, right? This is his last hurrah. He started to buy large quantities of postal coupons from countries that already had a weak economy. He then hired a bunch of agents and trained them up good, like Wolf of Wall Street style, and the whole idea was that you would promise investors that they would receive double their investment in return within 45 days. Yeah, how lovely does that sound? Agents got 10% commission during this whole thing, so as far as the scheme, it's actually not bad.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Stephen Griffiths. This is a person who is said to have idolized the Yorkshire Ripper, so I'm sure what comes next will be no surprise. Stephen was a PhD student who wanted to achieve fame, but through the most sinister way possible. Between June of 2009 and May of 2010, he would go on to take the lives of 3 separate women. His criminal history was also extremely concerning, as years ago, he had been arrested due to an unprovoked attack on a grocery store manager, and it is said that he previously stated that he saw himself becoming a serial killer. Shortly after he was arrested for his crimes, CCTV footage emerged that showed him celebrating after taking the life of his final victim. The footage showed him holding up a crossbow and giving the finger directly to the camera. It is said that Stephen pled guilty to his crimes once caught, not because he was remorseful, but because he wanted to receive the recognition for them. In our number 4 spot today, we have Joanna Denny. This is the person responsible for a series of killings and attacks that took place in March of 2013. Joanna is a very cold and very heartless person and has on many occasions been said to laugh at her crimes and the lives she took, even still behind bars. After the first of her crimes, authorities launched a manhunt for her and they used CCTV footage to help track her down. She was finally caught after attacking 2 dog walkers who, thanks to immediate medical intervention, were able to survive. There are many things about this story that make it exceptionally chilling, and it seems as though most people Joanna encounters are left with quite an impression of what a horrible person she really is. On the day she was sentenced, it is reported that the judge, Mr. Justice Spencer, said, quote, "Although you pleaded guilty, you've made it quite clear you have no remorse." He went on to say, quote, "You are a cruel, calculating, selfish, and manipulative serial killer." After this, he sentenced her to a whole life order, or life in prison without parole, and it is said that she smiled and laughed at this. Since her time in prison, she is said to have planned escape attempts that involved the killing of a prison guard and other terrifying ideas. In our number 3 spot today, we have Elizabeth Wetlaufer. Elizabeth is a former registered nurse and serial who is responsible for taking the lives of 8 and attempting to take the lives of another 6 senior citizens who were under her care. With a total of 14 victims that either passed away or were harmed by her actions, she is now one of the worst serial killers Canada has ever seen. And not to mention how she was doing these things to vulnerable people that she was supposed to have devoted her life to taking care of. Her first victim who passed away was James Silcox, who was 84 in 2007 and was a World War II veteran. She committed her crime by injecting insulin into her patients. In September of 2016, Liz ended up entering herself into a drug rehabilitation program at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, which is located here in Toronto. It was here that she ended up confessing to her horrific crimes. Of course, the staff at the hospital notified the proper authorities, and she was subsequently arrested, and she gave police a 2-hour confession. She admitted to knowing what she did was wrong, but she also just said that she had urges she couldn't control. She stated that, quote, "God or the devil or whatever wanted me to do it." In the end, she was sentenced to life in prison, but because of the way that the Canadian system works, she will at some point be eligible for parole, and hopefully denied. Alright? In our number 2 spot today, we have Kevin Davis. The story behind this killer is truly one of the most disturbing things I have ever heard in my entire life. Kevin Davis was 18 years old when he took the life of his own mother. It seems as though there was some sort of conversation beforehand that had made him upset, which of course is never a good enough reason to do something like this, but there are details about this crime I wish that I could just unlearn. In an interview with police, he gives them an extremely detailed account of basically everything that happened and seems to show absolutely no remorse at all. It is chilling, it is disgusting, and it is honestly just horrific. During his trial, a doctor did testify to say that he had a personality disorder, but that he also fully knew the difference between right and wrong, and knew that his crime was wrong, and that there were no medical diagnosis that could could justify his actions. Kevin is still in jail, where he will most likely spend the rest of his life, but he will become eligible for parole in 2044. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Axeman of New Orleans. Unfortunately, this is not the name of some terrible horror flick, and instead is the moniker given to a terrible, unidentified serial killer. This person was active in New Orleans, Louisiana, and its surrounding areas from May of 1918 to October 1919. As the name implies, those who were targeted by this person were usually attacked with an axe, and it usually was one that actually belonged to the victims themselves. Many people believe that this person may have been targeting people of Italian descent because this was a theme among the victims, and some also believe that he was mainly targeting women and only took the lives of men when they tried to intervene. This is actually somewhat supported by the homes where women were killed but men weren't. In the end, although this person is responsible for taking at least 12 lives, exactly who the Axeman is or was remains a mystery.
Number 10. Bonnie and Clyde. They kind of wrote the book on couples doing bad things, where if a bad couple happens to make headlines, they could be described as a real Bonnie and Clyde, a modern Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were as thick as thieves, 2 peas in a pod. Merciless crooks that formed a gang in the early 1930s and wreaked havoc across middle America by robbing banks and exercising their Second Amendment a little too liberally. They were becoming a real thorn in the side for law enforcement. To make matters worse, they were becoming somewhat idolized for their crimes by some of the public. Not good. However, not even a Ford V8 could help them outrun the law for too long, as one day in 1934 it saw the young couple ambushed by agents. And by agents, I mean they turned the car and the crooks into Swiss cheese. A lot of blam blam going on, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't good. Number 9. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Despite Canada being a majestic land full of moose, mounties, and rivers of maple syrup and politeness, it's not all fine and dandy up here, folks. Nope. We have our fair share of whack jobs too. Take for example Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, a Canadian couple who in the early 90s took part in some heinous crimes, including the delifing of Carla's own sister. Ooh, and maybe even some sexual related crime. It was Nazi, it was bad. When it came down to the trial, Paul was going away for a very long time. Nothing was going to change that. However, Carla got the plea deal of a lifetime and got a fraction of the time compared to Paul. However, videotapes found after the case show that Carla was much more involved than previously thought and would have given her a sentence much closer to Bernardo, maybe even the same. She's currently a free woman. Gross. Number 8. Charles Manson. Okay, this one isn't so much a couple as it is like a throuple or like a grouple. Lots of people intertwined. Anyway, just a weird group of hippies. But Charles Manson was involved, romantically speaking, with his family members or cult or whatever you want to call it, rather. You can't get much more scandalous than Manson. The Manson family took refuge at Spawn Ranch, an abandoned ranch that had been used as a film lot in the past, located in sunny California, Los Angeles. The family often experimented with mind-altering substances, the same ones that made the Beatles the Beatles. Unfortunately, it wasn't all fun-loving and vegan commune happiness, brother, at Spawn Ranch, as the family became involved in numerous criminal activities, which eventually involved in the delifing of an up-and-coming movie star, Sharon Tate. You ask your mom and dad about her, they'll tell you, they'll remember. If you've ever seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, then you'd also understand. I try to relate things, make it more relatable for you, but ask your mom and dad, they'll tell you about the 60s. Number 7. Susan and James Carson. Susan and James both had some troubled backgrounds. Can't have a criminal with that one, really. They fell in love and, well, they fell in love with the same illicit substance that made the Rolling Stones, the Rolling Stones. They changed their last name to Bear, and well, it just gets worse after this point. God had written letters to them to do so. Eventually, they declared themselves witch hunters and began a spree of violent crimes. Because that's what you do. The bodies and evidence kept piling up and they kept disappearing. A manifesto was eventually found calling for the assassination of then President Ronald Reagan and late night comedy legend Johnny Carson. No relation. They were sentenced to life and remained suspects in a bunch of unsolved cases. Ooh, I don't like that. That's gross. Number 6. The Rosenbergs. 1950s America. What a beautiful place. Imagine, if you will, you have a suburb with green grass, white picket fences, and a starter home. Dad buries his PTSD from the war and takes out his anger on the family sometimes, even violently. Mom is a stay-at-home mom who's on so many prescriptions she's forced to lay down during the day with a vodka martini just to get her strength back from a headache. Oof. All while under the threat of atomic annihilation. Oh, America the brave, America the beautiful. Except the biggest thing every American feared back then was actually communists. Yeah, I know, right? Who would have thought? Communists coming to take over because they threatened the great American way of life. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg looked just like any other couple you'd find in the suburbs, except they were Soviet spies. Spies that aided a group that was leaking atomic secrets to the Soviets, allowing the Soviets to have a nuclear program years before the Americans suspected them of having one. Both de-lifed by the state after being found guilty. However, Ethel wasn't as guilty as previously thought and could have received a lighter sentence. Oops. Our bad. Oh, she's innocent? You know what I mean? The flip the switch. Oh, dude, I already flipped the switch, dude. Too late.
In our number 5 spot today, we have Lavina Fisher. You may have heard Lavina's name before, and that is because she made American history when she became the first female serial killer in the United States. Wow, what a title. Sure, her parents were proud. Lavina, along with her husband John, were accused of luring travelers into their inn in Charleston, South Carolina during the 19th century and then killing them so that they could take their belongings. The couple were known for their hospitality, and many unsuspecting travelers fell victim to their deadly scheme as a result. Some stories even suggest that they had a trap door in one of the guest rooms that led to a pit where they would dump all of the bodies of their victims. Despite the numerous accusations and suspicions surrounding the Fishers, they were never formally charged with the killing. However, they were eventually caught and convicted for highway robbery and sentenced to hang. In our number 4 spot today, we have Arthur Shawcross. This man is also known as the Genesee River Killer, and his crime spree began in 1972. In trying to navigate these online guidelines, I can't exactly say who he specifically targeted, but what I will say is that while everyone on this list is particularly horrible, Arthur's crimes were some of the worst, if you catch my drift. This story, however, is a little unlike some of the others today, because after the first 2 of his crimes, he was apprehended, but for some insane reason, they allowed him to have a plea bargain where he was allowed to plead guilty to just 1 charge of only manslaughter, for which he served 14 years of his 25-year sentence. In the least surprising turn of events, once he was released on early probation, his real crime spree got started. He would go on to take the lives of 12 women from 1988 to 1989, and thankfully he was finally caught for these crimes and sent right back to prison. Of course, his initial early release was the subject of huge controversy, rightfully so, and Dr. Michael H. Stone, professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, called this early release, quote, one of the most egregious examples of the unwarranted release of a prisoner. In the end, Arthur passed away in prison while serving a 250-year sentence. He passed in 2008 after suffering a heart attack. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Hwaesong serial killer. This is the name used to describe a notorious unsolved criminal case that occurred in South Korea during the late 1980s. The killer was responsible for taking the lives of at least 10 women in the city of Hwaesong between 1986 and 1991. The victims were all found, but there was little to no evidence left at the crime scenes. The case was highly publicized and became one of the most infamous serial killer cases in South Korean history. Despite a massive investigation and the arrest of several suspects, including a man who confessed to the crimes, DNA evidence ultimately exonerated all of them. The case remains unsolved to this day, with many theories and speculations surrounding the identity of the killer. The Hwaesong serial killer case sparked significant changes in the way South Korea approaches criminal investigations, though, including the establishment of a national DNA database and the implementation of more advanced forensic techniques. In our number 2 spot today, we have Franklin Dwayne Alex. Franklin is a man who had quite an insane crime spree that lasted for about 6 months in the 1990s. Although short, it was anything but sweet. The spree started off in August of 1997 in Houston, Texas, and over the course of this spree, Franklin took the lives of at least 3 people. He committed robberies, he harmed people, he attempted to take more lives where thankfully the people survived, he kidnapped people. Literally any serious crime he could commit during those 6 months, he was doing it. In the end, Franklin was caught and put on trial for his crime spree, and he received a sentence of death, which was carried out on March 30th, 2010. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Dale Hausner and Samuel Dietman. Known as the serial shooters, the crimes these guys committed are definitely on the list of fears I have, which I'm pretty sure spawned from a Criminal Minds episode. These two were actively committing these crimes between May of 2005 and August of 2006, and basically, they were arsonists who would randomly set fire to objects, but they would also drive around and commit random drive-by shootings. That's the really scary part. The fire thing is also bad, don't get me wrong, but there's just something about completely random violence that absolutely terrifies me. In the end, a series of tips is what led investigators to identify the perpetrators of these horrible crimes, in particular one from a friend of Samuel who explained that Sam had actually confessed to some of the killings one night while drinking. In Dale's trial, he was found guilty of 80 out of the 87 felony charges that were brought forth, and that was all in one single trial. The charges included the killings and attempted killings he had done, arson, animal cruelty, and the drive-bys. In the end, he was sentenced to death 6 times, and his brother, who was later found out to have assisted in some of the crimes, was sentenced to 25 years. Samuel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. While Dale sat on death row, he apparently asked to be put to death as soon as possible, and in the end, in 2013, he decided to take his own life. Samuel, however, remains in prison. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness was a Norwegian-American serial killer who is believed to have killed over 40 people, including her own family, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Belle was born in Norway in 1859 and immigrated to the United States in 1881. She settled in Chicago, where she married her first husband and started a family. This was all fine and well until things soon took quite the turn. Belle began to collect life insurance policies on her family members, and if you're a true crime fan, you likely know where this is going. She went on to eventually kill them in a fire. She then moved to LaPorte, Indiana, where she purchased a farm and continued to lure wealthy suitors to her property just to kill them for their money and assets. She was known for her physical strength and was able to bury her victims' bodies on her property. Belle's crimes were discovered in 1908 when a fire destroyed her farm and the remains of several of her victims were found. We love when the villain is brought to justice, but unfortunately, that did not happen here. Belle herself was never found, and it is believed that she may have faked her own death and fled the country. In our number 9 spot today, we have Dorothea Puente. You know the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Well, this certainly is a case of that. If you took a glance at Dorothea and knew nothing about her, you'd probably assume she was someone's kind grandma who also had some cookies and a glass of milk waiting, but that could not be any further from the actual truth. In reality, she was actually a serial killer, and she decided to prey upon some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, people who were seeking help and assistance. Dorothea operated a large rooming house that was set in a large Victorian home in Sacramento, California. The residents who would often stay there were people who struggled with different substances such as alcohol, people who had been in mental hospitals, and the elderly. All of these people were receiving social security checks, and if they suddenly vanished, she figured no one would ask. In 1982, they did begin to vanish, but of course their social security checks were continually being cashed. As it turns out, Dorothea was taking their lives and then their money. She has now been called the landlady from hell. In our number 8 spot today, we have Yang Xinhai. You might be familiar with Yang already, as he is quite a notorious name in Chinese criminal history. Also known as the Monster Killer, Yang was a Chinese serial killer who killed at least 67 people between 2000 and 2003. Yang was born in 1968 in the central Chinese province of Henan, and he had a troubled childhood. He began his killing spree in 2000 when he started breaking into houses in rural areas and killing entire families. He targeted mainly farmers and migrant workers who were often living alone in isolated areas. Yang was eventually caught in 2003 after a massive manhunt, and he was found to be suffering from a mental illness. He confessed to his crimes and was sentenced to death in 2004. His execution was carried out in 2004 by firing squad, and his case is considered one of the most heinous and disturbing in Chinese criminal history. In our number 7 spot today, we have Pedro Lopez. Pedro is a man who lived a life committing some of the most horrific crimes I've ever heard of throughout South America in the 1970s. By the time the 1980s rolled around, he made a mistake during one of his awful crimes, and this thankfully led to his arrest. Once in police custody, he began to basically explain his entire life story, and he confessed to an astronomical amount of crimes. Police were a little skeptical of just how many crimes he said he committed, but Pedro was able to lead them to a mass grave where they recovered a total of 53 people's remains. Pedro, of course, went to jail, but get this, he was somehow released in 1994. I'm like, great. just before I was born. Nice. He wasn't just sent home straight away and instead was sent to some sort of mental institution for 3 years after, but he was also released from there. So aside from the crimes he committed, are you ready for the worst part? In 2002, he was suspected of being the perpetrator of a new crime, but no one has been able to find him since 1998. Yeah, he just disappeared. That's awesome. Love it. In our number 6 spot today, we have another Pedro Rodrigues Filho, also known as the Pedrino Matador. He is a Brazilian serial killer who is believed to have killed over 70 people, mostly other criminals, in the 1960s and 1970s. He did have quite a difficult childhood, as his father was a notorious criminal who actually really sadly harmed and killed his mother, so this of course had a profound influence on Pedro and his life. This experience is believed to have contributed to his violent behavior later in his life, and Pedro began his crime spree at a super young age, starting with a horrific crime when he killed the vice mayor of his town, who he believed was responsible for the death of his girlfriend. He continued to kill other criminals, often targeting those who had previously wronged him or his family. Pedro was arrested in 1973 and was eventually convicted of killing 71 people. He is currently serving a prison sentence in Brazil and is known for his outspoken and very unrepentant attitude towards his crimes. While I'm sure we can all feel sympathy for the things Pedro experienced in life, it truly is no excuse for the things that he chose to do.
Number 5. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Does this really need an introduction? That's all anybody's talking about right now, but Johnny Depp, one of America's greatest actors and teenage heartthrob on 21 Jump Street. Am I right, ladies? God, he was cute in that. Amber Heard being some lady who had a breakout role as a fish lady in Aquaman. I haven't seen Aquaman, that's just what it looks like to me. And all of this in one of the messiest divorces ever publicized. Yikes. This trial is happening as I speak. Probably right now. It's happening right now. And we are slowly reaching the outcome. However, all I'll say is when two gorgeous millionaires marry each other and you mix in some illicit substances, well, are we really surprised this didn't work out? Johnny Depp we're talking about here. If I ever get rich and famous, I will never treat my loved ones like that, or any of the amazing people that follow me. I love you guys. You're the best. Thanks so much for watching all the time, guys. I love you. And checking me out on my own socials. Oh, shucks. You guys are the best. Number 4. French royalty. Imagine being so down bad with your husband that it starts a revolution and then inspires other European nations to be free from monarchical tyranny. Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI were the last kings and queens of France. If crimes against humanity don't count, then I don't know what does. People had no rights, even less rights than truckers in Ottawa. Oh, that's the worst. It was a very interesting time in history. By the end, the Castile had been sieged, heads were on pikes, and the national razor was brought out just to show how democratic a new government can be. Next time, be sure to share food at the bread table. That's all I gotta say about that. Number 3, Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Talk about scandal. Oh, if we had social media back then, this would have been everywhere. A regular Romeo and Juliet. And a little bit of Bonnie and Clyde too, actually. Cleopatra had a few Roman men wrapped around her finger. It was politics, and she was playing the long game. The star-vexed lovers were playing with two empires, some of the largest at the time. However, their political string-pulling and bedsheet wrestling would come to a tragic end. Cleopatra and Mark Antony would never be around to see their empires fall after some betrayal, and both of them having their lives taken away. They did some naughty things in between that, though. They weren't very nice. Number 2, Mustache Man and Blonde Lady. Hey. Even the biggest, baddest guys in history get lonely. Ava Braun, Mustache Man's main squeeze and wife right up until the Red Army came a-knockin'. Oh boy, they came a-knockin'. We all know what he's guilty of, and honestly, I think she's kinda guilty too. We've all seen the lost German footage of the boys making plans at the Eagle's Nest, and there she is. I'd say that doesn't look too good. I'm not a lawyer, or I am, but it doesn't look too good. It's kind of like if Adam and I were on an episode of Cops, and we got pulled over in a car together. The footage made it to the show, which means there's something in the car. It all depends on who wants to take the blame. Otherwise, you're guilty by association, or an accessory to the fact. So, yeah, I think she is kinda guilty too. Yep. If you weren't guilty, you would've gone down in the bunker with him. You know what I'm saying, Chris? You know what I'm saying? Number 1, Mussolini and partners, because he had more than one. A lot of people think Mustache Man did it on his own, but the truth is he had a lot of help from his fascismo friend in Italy, Mussolini. From organizing his fascist beatdown gangs to the brown shirts and all the war crimes in between, Mussolini had a hand in it. He showed him the way. Mussolini not only did all this while married, but kept the company of unsavory mistresses. It's a good thing he controlled the media because people wanted to say some bad things about him and his most favorite mistress, Claretta. His wife Rachel stayed with him up until the end, when him and Claretta were brutally unalived by citizens fed up with his chin, he had a chin thing, and his machismo government, multiple crimes against humanity, and cheated on his wife. You know, we know you knew better. Come on, let's be honest.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Albert Fish. Albert is one of the oldest people on this list. He was dubbed the Brooklyn Vampire or the Moon Maniac. So that's great. Or the Boogeyman himself. Those are the 3 nicknames that he goes by. That's absolutely horrible. It's pretty clear that Albert was a terrible human being who did terrible things that I can't really say. But as his nickname hints towards, he did some horrible things, right? Obviously. In the early 1900s, Albert was arrested, tried, and convicted for killing and doing other things with his teeth to 3 people, but the horror was not over yet. No, Albert began to claim that although people knew about 3, that number was really closer to 100. And he even claimed that a lot of these victims came from every state. That's disgusting. And to make matters even worse, as if it wasn't already horrible enough, this deranged lunatic also sent a letter to the mother of one of his victims. He detailed everything about how he lured her and the rest of these horrific things that occurred afterwards, things that I can't say on this, YouTube box. This is one of those people that I'm not, sad at all they don't exist anymore. This is, I'm all about like rehab and treating people, but I'm like, just don't exist. How about that? You just stop eating people. Number 9, Robert Pickton. This horrible person is one of the worst Canadians to ever live and is one of our country's worst serial killers of all time. Pickton dropped out of school and began working at his family's pig farm, and this is where most of his absolutely horrific crimes took place, at this farm. He was first arrested in 2002 and was convicted in 2007 of taking the lives of 6 people, but throughout an extremely lengthy investigation, evidence of many more killings came to light. It's always more than we think, which is horrible. During his time in jail, an undercover police officer posed as his cellmate, and Pickton confessed to 49 crimes to him. 49. Apparently he was saying to this undercover officer that he wanted to take one more life to make it an even 50, and that he only got caught because he was sloppy. It makes me sick saying that out loud. That's disgusting. The entire trial was a bit of a mess, but it led to a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years, which was the longest possible sentence under Canadian law at the time. This unfortunately does mean that he will be eligible for parole within the next decade. So, yep, let's move on with the list. Number 8, Robert Hansen. Robert is often referred to as the Butcher Baker, and his story is, again, obviously horrific. He's one of the most prolific serial killers in Alaska's history because for over a decade, he would kidnap women and bring them into the wilderness where he would then stalk them like prey. How do these people exist? I'm just now realizing that there's definitely an episode of Criminal Minds about this guy. There probably is, right? Sometimes the premise is so dark that it just sticks with you forever. This is one of those. The reason he got away with his crimes for so long is because outside of these horrific crimes, he was a soft-spoken baker. Yeah, he was a baker, like I said. One of my friends is a baker. I'm gonna message him. I'm gonna ask so many questions now. Robert was heading to church by day and then prowling gentlemen's clubs at night looking for the next victim. What led to the downfall of this horrible monster was this badass named Cindy Paulson, who changed history, okay? She was able to escape from Robert and was sure to leave evidence behind. She made sure of that. Then she went to authorities and told them what exactly happened, and this of course led to a search warrant for Robert's property, which is where all of said evidence was waiting. And then Robert was obviously found guilty. Robert is believed to have taken the lives of at least 17 women, and in 1983 he was sentenced to 461 years and a life sentence without the possibility of parole. So yeah, unless you got some Tuck Everlasting water, you're gone, pal. Number 7, Chester Turner. Chester is an American serial killer who on April 30th, 2007 was convicted of taking the lives of 11 women in the Los Angeles area. And on June 19th, 2014, he was convicted of 4 more that they were able to tie back to him. So again, it's more than we think. He's been referred to by prosecutors as one of the most prolific serial killers in the city's history. And if you know anything about LA history, you'll know that's pretty f***ed up to hear. In his original trial that led to conviction, Chester was sentenced to death, but at the following one, in 2014, he also received an additional death sentence. Nice, just an extra one, just for fun. Just throw on a couple more. In the end, like with a lot of these kinds of cases, in the end, DNA came to save the day and help authorities find out who was committing these horrible, horrible crimes. So, A1 for science. We locked them up, we found out. Number 6, Jeffrey Dahmer. Of course, we have to throw in Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most well-known serial killers with his crimes taking place from 1978 to 1991. Your parents probably remember a lot of this. His crimes are far too brutal for this channel or this website, but he's known for taking the lives of 17 different people, I'll say that. At his trial, not only did he plead not guilty, but his attorney had some interesting words for the court. His attorney stated that his bloody pattern had caused him to believe that he himself was the devil, which was intended to, bolster his insanity plea and help him out. Again, that devil made me do it type of bullshit. His attorney said that he became enamored, overwhelmed, and caught up in the character in the movie The Exorcist 3. Said character was Satan, because he was the personification of evil. Not only was Jeffrey found to be sane and ended up being sentenced to multiple life sentences in prison, but not too long after his sentence started, he was killed by a fellow inmate. I wonder if the devil made him do it. That'd be ironic, huh? Number 5. The Doodler, another stupid nickname for another horrible unidentified killer. He received his nickname due to the fact that he would sketch his victims before taking their lives. Yeah, how sinister is that? You see that on TikTok, but this is like the evil, horrible version of that. This unidentified killer committed their crimes in the San Francisco area from January 1974 to September 1975, and they specifically targeted the gay community. It's believed that 14 deaths can be attributed to this killer, while 3 others were injured in the process. Unfortunately, because of the stigma and the sensitivity surrounding gay men at the time, the 3 who survived this monster's attacks were very reluctant when speaking to authorities for fear of being outed as a result of it. This, of course, has led to there being very little information for them to work with in terms of, actually identifying the person responsible. But for a while, there was a primary suspect, but that person has never been officially charged because sadly, none of the survivors felt comfortable enough to testify in court. There's also a very real chance that authorities know who the killer is, but just don't have the evidence to prove it in the court of law, which is also a terrifying thought. Number 4. The I-70. This unidentified killer is known to have taken the lives of 6 store clerks in the Midwest back in the spring of 1992. The reason he is referred to as the I-70 killer is because most of the stores were just a few miles off Interstate 70, I-70. While most of his victims were women, there was one man, but it's believed that he may have been expecting a female employee at the time, and that's the only difference there. The killings were clearly the main objective of his crimes as well, considering the fact that each scene there was only a small amount of cash that was actually taken. Aside from these initial 6 crimes, it's thought that he also might be responsible for the deaths of 3 more store clerks in Texas back in 1993 and 1994, as well as 1 more in Indiana in 2001. Number 3. Jason Derek Brown. This piece of work has been missing ever since November 2004. That's quite a long time, but that doesn't mean authorities have given up just yet. Jason fled from Phoenix, Arizona in the year after he allegedly took the life of an armored car guard who was just outside of a movie theater. Now, after committing this already horrific crime, he then took the money and then ran, just to make things even worse. On the FBI website, where it details his crimes as well as other details about him and who to contact with any information, all that good stuff, it gives a little bio on Jason, and it says that he enjoys being the center of attention and that he clearly likes showing off his luxurious lifestyle. Yeah, it's crazy how many of these people are known for trying to flaunt their stolen lifestyle. Another thing the website reminds us is that he should be considered armed and dangerous at all times. Number 2, the River City Ripper. One of the most terrifying things that exists are, of course, serial killers who are still on the loose, especially when you find out that they've been recently active, right? That's the horrible new news that we don't want to hear. Now, this serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, and 3 of which were fatal. These horrific crimes took place between August of 2020 and April of 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and being able to provide a description of the assailant, there's still, of course, very little to go on in terms of actually being able to identify this horrible human being. The FBI was contacted shortly after the survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created a profile of this unidentified killer. So there's work being done, although there's little evidence, there's still some momentum. And finally, number 1, Pedro Lopez. Pedro Lopez had a very difficult life growing up, and unfortunately this led to him living a life committing a plethora of horrible crimes throughout South America during the 1970s. Now, by the time the 80s had rolled around, he had made a mistake during one of these awful crimes, and this led to his arrest. Now, once in police custody, he spilled everything on basically his entire life and confessed at that point to an insane amount of crimes. Just confessed to everything and just unloaded. Like, we're talking confessing to 240 killings on top of the 110 that they already suspected him of doing. Police were a little skeptical of just how many crimes he said he committed, but Pedro was able to lead them to a mass grave where they recovered a total of 53 people's remains. So at that point, they're like, yeah, we believe you, this is horrible. Pedro, of course, went to jail, but get this, he was somehow released in 1994, which is absolutely insane. That's why I had to put him on number 1 here. He was sent to some sort of mental institution for 3 years, but he was also released from there for good behavior. That's horrible. Kicking off our list at number 10, vending machine killer. Okay, right off the hop, we have to know that apparently there are a lot of vending machines in Japan. Like it's something around 1 for every 23 people. So yeah, that's a lot of snacks. So in 1985 in Hiroshima, there were 12 people who passed away and 35 people who were seriously injured from being poisoned with a chemical herbicide. Now, when the string of poisonings were investigated, authorities realized that they had one thing in common, and that was the fact that they all had the same drink shortly before falling ill. So around the time of this entire ordeal, there was a company that had launched a marketing campaign where they gave a free drink with every purchase made from, you guessed it, a vending machine. One of the many vending machines in Japan. So when people didn't want their free drink, they would just leave it on top of the vending machine for the next person who came along, which is super nice and thoughtful instead of throwing it in the garbage. But on the other hand, there's some people who are not nice or thoughtful and rather horrible. And it turns out someone was taking these drinks and lacing them with poison and then leaving them back on top of the machines for some random stranger to come around, drink it, and then be sick or pass away. Like those numbers that I mentioned earlier. It's almost impossible for authorities to be able to track down whoever was doing this because, well, you have to narrow down where the person picked up the drink, and that's pretty impossible seeing as in 1985 there weren't nearly as many CCTV cameras as there are today, or vending machines apparently for that matter. So unfortunately, whoever was responsible for a mass poisoning of strangers is still out there somewhere. Number 9, Jacek Jaworek. Now, this is a man who was on the run because of horrible crimes that he committed in July of last year, so a little more recent than the 80s. He took the lives of 3 people who were a part of his own family. One of the family members was able to escape this horrific nightmare and was able to make it safely to the neighbor's house where they could call the authorities for help. But since these horrific crimes took place, he has gone missing and no one is sure of his whereabouts. Right now, it's speculated that he likely escaped from Poland where the crimes took place, but his exact whereabouts still remain quite the mystery. He could be literally anywhere, which is terrifying. Number 8, John Pyle. This human is a pile of garbage. This horrible human is not an undercover spy or an insane fraudster. He's just a monster who committed certain specific crimes that are unfortunately a little more common than any of us would like to know. Because of the nature of his crimes, I can't really talk about them here in this video because let's just say they're that brutal. But let's just say that he's definitely one of the worst kind of criminals out there. On June 24th, 2016, authorities searched his home after receiving 3 tips relating to these crimes. Now, the amount of and the severity of the incriminating evidence that they found during said search, he was charged with 30 different second-degree felonies alone off just that one search, which could bring a sentence of 450 years in prison. Now, he was arrested the same day, but he posted a bail bond of $90,000 as well as surrendering his passport. Now, fast forward 16 months, October 23rd, 2017, and of course this guy does not show up for his hearing. And thus we have a fugitive now on the run. Number 7, the Beer Man. He took the lives of at least 6 people in Mumbai, India between October 2006 and January of 2007. It's not a lot of time at all. That's a lot of people in a very short amount of time. The reason this unidentified monster is called the Beer Man, such an odd nickname, is due to one fact about each crime scene, which ended up being how they linked these crimes together in the first place. This was the presence of beer bottles that were found scattered next to each of the bodies that were found. Now, of course, it's been over a decade since the crimes were committed, so it's definitely upsetting that this person has yet to have been caught, obviously. But it's been a while, so maybe they're naturally gone. You know what I'm saying? Number 6, the Honolulu Killer. This is another one of those horrible, horrifying, unidentified serial killers who was active in and around Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, these crimes took place in 1985 and 1986, and throughout those years, it's said that whoever is responsible for these crimes took the lives of at least 5 women. These women seemingly didn't have any connection to each other as they were all from different walks of life, but because of the gruesome similarities between each of them, authorities were able to determine that they were likely committed by the same horrible person. Despite the years that it's been, the perpetrator has never been identified and could still be out there somewhere hiding from taking responsibility for their actions. Number 5, Sam Little. Known for being one of the worst serial killers in history, Sam has confessed to taking the lives of more than 90 people, and while authorities have only been able to for sure connect him to 30, they say they have no reason to doubt the validity of his other confessions. They're like, yeah, it probably happened. If he's saying it, sadly, it's probably the truth. Sam was able to continue on this horrible path for so many years because of the fact that he committed these crimes in different states and kept moving, right? Different counties, of course, made it difficult to connect his crimes to one another. Man was on the move. In an interview interview with an investigator named Sergeant LeBlanc, as they discussed religious beliefs, they spoke about the nature of sin. Now, Sam stated he had no fear of God and said that God made him this way, so why should he ask for forgiveness? He's just trying to like be cool or something, try to make his life a haiku. All of a sudden we're like, no, you're just a crazy person. He said that God knew everything he did. He also allegedly told a few select people that he believed that he was the devil. There it is. See, it's always something. It's always the devil something. Devil made me blank. It's like, okay. Number 4, Arnie Johnston. Speak of the devil, this one's definitely the most well-known one. Here we go. This one's a little bit different. It's now a cinematic adventure, apparently. This trial was well known previously, but of course it became more widely spread as it was the trial in the newest Conjuring movie. That's what it was based off of. In 1981, Arnie Cheyenne Johnston killed 40-year-old Alan Bono in what appeared to have been a simple argument gone wrong quickly. It got way more twisted and confusing, right? When it came to his defense for the crime, he said the devil made him do it. Just like that third installment in the Conjuring franchise. The title, The Devil Made Me Do It, is in direct relation. This is not just a cool James Wan Conjuring title. This is the real case. This was the first time in history that possession has been used in an American courtroom as a defense. Pretty interesting, right? You think about it. You hear these stories often, but it has to go somewhere. It has to go to court. This was the first time that happened. Arnie had been at the scene of about 3 exorcisms that had occurred prior to his alleged possession and then his, killing. And this is why there's so many believers that believe that he's actually possessed or that the devil made him do it because he was part of these exorcisms or whatever. Because he was guilty by association, a couple exorcisms, so now he's evil apparently. At the end of the day, the jury in the trial decided to convict him of manslaughter. Number 3, Adnan Kolak. This Turkish serial killer who was responsible for taking the lives of 11 women, who were all ages between 68 and 95, absolutely horrible. He was also responsible for 6 more crimes once he was convicted that were also elderly women. So again, there's more than we initially thought. Now down the road, he eventually got caught for these horrible crimes, thankfully, and he was sentenced to 6 death sentences as well as 40 years in prison, just to make sure, just to top it off. Right? I would hope that's the case, make it 80 years. Sure, doesn't matter at that point. The point is, see you never. Get the fuck out of here. Now, this was back in 1995 when he was first sentenced, but cut to 2004, the death penalty in Turkey was abolished, which meant that in May 2005, Adnan Kolak was released from jail. His nickname is the Artvin Monster, and he was released from jail. Yeah, I have a nickname for him personally, but I can't say any of those words on YouTube, so let's save that for later. Number 2, Charlene Gallego. A match made in hell, it seems. This is twisted. Back in the late 70s, Charlene Gallego, alongside her horrible husband, Gerald, were the worst in Sacramento, California. They kidnapped and then later killed 10 victims. They kept them and then abused them for a while horribly before ultimately ending their lives. Now, it really was the most twisted situation. Just disgusting people, really. Cut to 1984, Charlene pleads guilty to murder and receives 16 years. Her horrible husband was waiting for execution, but he died of cancer before meeting his demise. One of those things where you're like, close, you got close. Charlene got out and moved to Fair Oaks, California, and has since changed her name. So one of them's dead, one of them's absolutely free, and changes her name. Yep, sleeping fair. And finally, number 1, the Zodiac Killer. Of course, this one had to make it on the list because, why, of course. There's a plethora of terrifying people on this list here, but nothing is as terrifying as an uncaught serial killer. And the Zodiac is definitely the most prolific of them all. The Zodiac Killer took the lives of 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. He was most known for targeting young couples or a lone male cab driver, one of the two. Now, despite 2 people luckily and thankfully escaping his attempted evil doings, he still has never been caught. He was one of those losers who left notes and stuff for the police to find, thought he was like a DC villain, thought he was cool. One of those psychos. While no one's ever heard from the Zodiac since 1974, the case remains active in many different countries, and maybe one day we'll finally know who the real Zodiac Killer is.
Number 10, Dracula. The man, the myth, the legend, Vlad the Impaler. This dude was so down bad, he was the inspiration for Dracula. There's really only one reason why he was so evil, and honestly, it's in his name. Vlad the Impaler liked to impale people, oftentimes alive. As if this was the worst thing thought up by a human being ever, he would leave the pikes on display, creating a horror only the eyes of medieval Europe could see. There's gonna be a lot of bad dudes on this list, some really saucy villains, unsavory characters who will make your skin crawl, but only Vlad has been bad enough to get a monster inspired by him, essentially turning his actions into somewhat of a spooky mythology. Dude gives off some serious goth energy. There's a few portraits of him, but if you look at it, he's got this stare in his eyes, like he wants to impale me or something. Vlad be nimble, Vlad be quick, just wait till you see his sharpened sticks. Number 9, The guy everyone knows. Look, YouTube won't let me say his name, but do we really have to? I mean, it's Mustache Man. Infamous for his bad art and lame book, he was the fascist leader of Germany. The very same leader who forced the world into World War II. Remember that one? Yeah, he's the very same monster who organized the destruction of Jewish peoples in Europe, and if he had his way, probably the whole world. I wouldn't be surprised if you showed a picture of him to anyone on Earth, any country, rich or poor, and they will most likely know who that was. That's the kind of evil that will get you talked about in classes all over the world, and likely for a long time. Eventually, he got what was coming to him, and the world had peace and prosperity, and there was never ever another bad stinky war ever again. Why is he not number one, you might be asking? Well, that's just because his numbers don't compare to others, which is a very troubling statistic. I'll get to that later. Number 8. Busy man. Most people on this list are not going to need any introduction. Genghis Khan is no exception to that. The Mongol warrior king saw his nomadic empire stretch thousands of miles, being one of history's largest empires. If you've been paying attention in history class, and you should have been, don't skip class or Big Ched will put you in the naughty corner. Bad. Yes, that's right, I just referred to myself in the third person. Speaking of third person, that's how many people Genghis unalived in his bloody conquests. Oh, did I say 3? I actually meant a lot. Did I say a lot? I actually meant a disturbing amount. Some people like to point out that he was accepting of other people's cultures and beliefs. Yes, that is true, but that's after he burned down the village right before he got to yours, and you got forcibly assimilated into his numbers. As you can also imagine, a bloodthirsty barbarian like him did not treat women with much respect. It's Genghis Khan, man. That's just how it do be. Number 7. So long, Bowser. Ivan the Terrible. Okay, sure, Vlad was called the Impaler, but you can kind of take that in a different way, right? Not in that way. All innuendos aside, with a name like Ivan the Terrible, it's kind of hard to work around that. Even as a child, Ivan was showing traits of an evil dictator, or supervillain really, as it's said that he would throw animals off of tall roofs in the same way that Mario throws Bowser off of platforms. Becoming the first Tsar of Russia, and probably its worst, he's responsible for many horrors and crimes, but the most infamous being his responsibility for his own son's demise. After a heated argument regarding his unborn grandson, and in a binding fit of rage, Ivan claimed his son's life. Sure, dads get angry when sons don't help mow the lawns or help take out the trash, but that's going a little far. One minute you're having a fight with your dad, and the next minute you're being carried out by Ghanaian pallbearers. You know, the dancing guys, the memes, the casket, you know? Yeah, it's a joke. Number 6, the Mad Doctor. I love doctors. Shout out to the people working in the medical field right now. I appreciate you. I couldn't even imagine the horror that is medical school though. We all know my track record for reading, and hours upon hours of studying would just be bad for my health. I gotta squeeze more video game time in there, it's just how I work, man. However, one doctor I would not want to cross is Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. He is most likely the inspiration for a lot of horror movies. A serial unaliver. Said to have been performing surgeries on animals at a young age, which, again, doing some freaky deaky stuff to animals as a kid is like the red flag of red flags. It's like the only red flag. If that wasn't enough, he used to steal cadavers from the university he was studying at and doing all kinds of not nice things to them, naughty, bad. Having a clear obsession with medical practices and anatomy probably was helpful in disposing of his victims. And like something from Tales of the Crypt Keeper, that's exactly what he did. He constructed a large house, or building really, with trap doors, secret tunnels, and a lot of rooms. A basement where he could dispose of his victims. He would later then open this house of horrors up as a hotel where unknowing people would come to meet their doom.
Yes, Tales of the Crypt Keeper. Come check in to the Hotel of Doom.
Number 5. Google. The search engine that got me through school, jobs, adulthood, everything really, you name it. First of all, I remember when Google was new or newer, like I would sit for hours as a kid and just Google photos of boats or buildings, just things that exist in the world because I could. It was fun. Things on the internet, that was exciting enough, but apparently not for Google. The tech giant was hit with a $4.3 billion fine by EU regulators for breaking antitrust laws. Yeah, antitrust, the same company that autofills all your every time you try and sign in. Remember that one. Also hit thumbs up, or else.
Number 4, Siemens. A household name. Not even sure how to say it correctly. We know this company. Industry. healthcare, and energy. It's one of those companies that puts money into a ton of stuff like cyber this and cyber that. It's most known for tech stuff, software, and billion-dollar bribes. That's right. German engineering giant Siemens AG has been fined $800 million by US authorities and an additional $395 million by German authorities. The company recently pleaded guilty to the corruption charges bribing foreign officials that violates a law called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Between 2002 and 2017, the companies acted as a cartel to illegally share out contracts valued at around $4 billion. The company is alleged to have bribed officials approximately 4,000 times between 2000 and 2006, with the goal of winning contracts abroad as an alpha supplier. Okay, so a little mob stuff, huh? I like it. A little suitcase full of money kind of thing. And that's exactly what happened. Hidden bank accounts, obscure intermediaries, and pseudo consultants. That's a mouthful. FBI caught on, of course, in 2008, but it wasn't until 2021 that the investigation unfolded and fines were issued. In total, about $1.6 billion for foreign bribery charges. Wow, that's a lot of money.
Number 3, Bank of America. Following the financial crisis of 2008, banks were held under a new light. This was a black light, right? Ready to see all the yuck going on behind that dirty counter. What's going on over there? What is that? Show me that. Any sketchy detailings will now be abundantly clear. Let's avoid further financial situation. We can't be putting out subprime loans to sketchy clients anymore. We need people who are going to pay us back. Kinda helps. Then cut to 2013, the company was caught for selling toxic mortgages to investors. Yeah, that's a no-no. They were a big part of the financial crisis, so this time the Bank of America got a fine. This time they got fined $16.65 billion. That's like 2 games of Monopoly put together. All the cash, if you add them up, that's a lot of cash.
Number 2, TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company. Okay, so now we're talking big money. Big whoopsie daisies. 4 former TEPCO executives have been ordered by court to pay $80 billion over the 2011 Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster. In March 2011, a large undersea earthquake off the coast of Japan triggered a massive tsunami. When the huge waves flooded the generators, the cooling systems failed, causing the reactors to melt. The Fukushima meltdown was considered the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986 and prompted the declaration of a 30-kilometer evacuation zone around the Japanese plant. TEPCO is currently engaged in a decades-long effort to decommission the plant, which will take years to clear. The devastation alone caused the deaths of 18,000 people and wiped out entire towns off the map. Yeah, that's gonna cost you. Also, how are these 4 dudes gonna come up with $80 billion? It's like $20 billion each. Hey, if you're gonna ignore the massive tsunami warnings from scientists, you're gonna have to clean it up, dude. Also, a huge nuclear power plant close to an underwater volcano? Explain that one to me.
And finally, number 1, Pfizer. When we think of the name Pfizer, there's now obviously mixed feelings. Pun intended. But back in 2009, before they were making cures, they were paying hefty fines. The world's largest pharmaceutical company had to pay a record-breaking fine. They had to pay $2.3 billion in criminal and civil penalties over unlawful prescription drug promotions. Yeah, you can't be doing that stuff. Included in this mighty slap on the wrist was a $1.2 billion criminal fine. And the agreement was also a criminal forfeiture of $105 million. This was the 4th time Pfizer got charged with this magnitude in a decade. They were on a bad streak, dare I say. They promoted their products at resorts. They would invite doctors in to these meetings and then give them golf or massages. They would pepper you up, right? So you were then Team Pfizer, right? You were on board. FBI Assistant Director Kevin Perkins says the corporate giant was blatantly violating the law and misleading the public through false marketing claims, i.e. golf. See, it's always golf. That's why they're swearing. They're making cures over there for that left swing.
Coming in at number 10, Corey Delaney. I thought I'd start this list off nice and easy and more on the cheaper side of things. This one is fun. We all remember this movie. Project X, the comedy from 2012 about a young man who decides to throw the biggest, raddest kegger ever at his parents' house and ends up getting in a ton of trouble. Yeah, fun fact, also the most illegally torrented movie of 2012. I don't know, just a fun fact for you. And yes, based on a very true story. Delaney, now Worthington, of Melbourne, Australia, decided in 2008 that he would throw a small yet quaint shindig with a couple of his buddies. Couple chips, couple dips. Actually, it was more like, quote, parents away, tell your mates. You don't want to miss this, it's going to be huge. Written on MSN, publicly. Well, this online invite turned into about 600 raging teenagers showing up to one house. If you've seen the movie, that's pretty well it. Basically looked like The Purge, but like 4 locos on the lawn everywhere. Crashed and broken cars, broken into homes, The street, an absolute nightmare. But a school legend. Small fine though for mom and dad, only about $20,000 in damages. Not a bad fine. More of a fun little slap on the wrist if you ask me. Hey, drywall holes and a new roof are gonna cost ya. If we threw a rager back in high school, what do you think mom and dad would do? Like they'd publicly skin us like a medieval cat.
I would never see my phone again. I'd be grounded for life. Number 9, Tiger Woods. Yeah, before we head down to the oil spills and cover-ups and all that jazz, we gotta have some fun, right? 14-time champion Tiger Woods. He's been in many spotlights over the many years, but we'll keep this in this lane for now, you know? Lane. He's good. Back in 2011, after the Masters, a viewer from Texas wrote to the FCC to complain that one Tiger Woods had been cursing and using a profane 4-letter word on live television. How dare he? I wonder why. Then later on during the second round coverage, another viewer wrote in and they say, on Good Friday, while my husband was watching the Masters golf tournament, all of a sudden the living room was now filled with a person swearing, using the Lord's name in vain, and damning during golf. How unacceptable is that? When watching a sports program, we should be free from vile, insulting assaults like this one issued by Tiger Woods when he was unhappy with his golf drive. Yeah, good thing this household doesn't watch rugby. I don't know, imagine that. Yeah, I can't imagine what's frustrating about messing up a 400-yard drive in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah, what compels a person to swear in a moment like that? Oh, I wonder, can't imagine. Every time my finger touches a hot pan, it just comes out, you can't help it. I swear at mini golfing, I'll be at a mini golfing thing 14 feet away from a birthday party. They're hiding behind like a glow in the dark whale and I'm like, okay.
Number 8, JP Morgan Chase. We've heard about this name in every movie that involves a suit. Guys in a suit? JP Morgan is a line somewhere in that movie. Basically, this company in 1877 started as a bank and then funded some construction stuff and then bought some more banks, then paid for some public stuff. Hey, Brooklyn's Bridge, nice. And some more online banking stuff till we finally know it as one of the largest financial industries on earth. JP Morgan Chase literally has a hand in everything in everyone's pocket. Where do I tap? Just right here. And that's done? Wow. And in 2021 was slapped with a huge fine for over 300 years worth of info publicly being traded and leaked. Uh-oh. 2 separate banking regulators have charged JP Morgan Chase over $200 million for leaking crucial security data on their work communication platform, WhatsApp. Yeah, WhatsApp. You know the worldwide conversation maker? All you need is a number and an area code. Well, apparently employees have been using this platform as their main source of communication since early 2015, and it seems that it breaches a couple of their security protocols. I get random people asking me all the time if this is Bridget or Trisha. Imagine 300 years worth of secure data, trillions of dollars at stake, and they're asking Tom where he's getting lunch today. Couldn't you just email each other at the office? You know, someone was just sitting there for hours on end scrolling through 1777 documents in WhatsApp trying to find out where there's buried treasure. Keywords. Keywords.
Number 7, Rory McLlroy. Okay, I had to include another golf one because it's so funny to me. It's funny to me that the sport that requires the most patience and stillness around every player, there's literally a guy that walks around with a shush board, like it's a live sitcom from the 90s. It's respected. Even the way you clap during golf, that's not a hockey clap, it's a classy clap. It's a golf clap, you know? It has like a little weird thing to it. So when people like Rory McLlroy toss a club after said peaceful sport moment, it's jarring, right? It's gonna shock you. The USGA takes professionalism very seriously, and back in 2015, in the second round of the World Championships, on the 8th hole, Rory McLlroy hits his ball right into the water on a par 5, and in a fit of rage, he tosses his club into the pond as well, which is wild. Moments earlier, both the ball and the club were on land. Now they're both sunken treasure. All because of this man, Rory. This isn't golf-like, this isn't professional. God knows he probably swore too. So in turn, Rory was fined $25,000. And after a quick apology, that fine dropped down to $5,000. Yeah, all because he said sorry.
Number 6, Volkswagen. Next up, emissions. Das Auto. Volkswagen has been issued a couple fines in the last 15 years. Hey, great cars, but a couple of issues here. Apparently, Volkswagen has been under investigation by the automotive industry and the European Commission since around 2009 for violating harmful emissions qualifications and even selling defective cars to other countries, in which Canada charged Volkswagen about $200 million in a lawsuit over unsafe manufacturing, $450 million in a cartel dispute surrounding the unsafe regulation of outdated nitrogen oxide technology, named as the main player in the Dieselgate scandal. The Dieselgate scandal, like the Watergate scandal. I don't get the reference, I'm way too young. Basically, they got caught using cheap and faulty software that doesn't meet safe to use emission standards and had to fess up. Lying, cheating, and covering it up, huh? Just driving and coughing non-stop, 13 puffers and car payments for a Mini Cooper, who'd have thought? Perfect. To date, Volkswagen has been issued around $1 billion in legal fines. Yikes.
Number 5. Bad comrade. Josef Mengele was the leader of the Soviet Union for probably too long. A man who worked his way up the political chain until General Secretary meant leader, which, if you look it up, it's kind of crazy. That itself is a crazy story. He's responsible for a great loss of life. It is estimated in the range of 40 million people. Ooh, yikes. Most spooky evil dudes usually go after an enemy, to someone they consider to not be part of them. He did do this, but a lot of his own people sadly met their ends from the Red Menace too. Organized and deliberate purges of people and famines to starve people. It's safe to say he is and was and always will be one of the worst humans to ever walk the face of the earth. To put it in perspective, Jalen's son was a soldier in World War II, and after being captured by German forces, the Germans thought they had one on the boss. Heck, this was a get out of jail free card, right? Well, when a prisoner trade was proposed by the Germans, Jalen laughed at only how an evil communist could, and denied the trade. His son would later perish in a POW camp shortly after. What a monster.
You think you trade with me? Keep him, I don't want.
Number 4. Fine white powder. Oh, to be in Miami in the mid-1980s. If I had one wish, it would be to spend a summer night in the neon-soaked beaches of Miami under strict laws enforced by a president who didn't know what was going on right underneath his nose. If you were around back then you probably got to experience something like that. Or at least in my fever dreams. I hope so. But as much as I'd like to be Tony Montana with all that sugar on his desk, I know it's bad for my health. Speaking of bad for your health, Pablo Escobar. I know, that's where I went with that. Probably the most ruthless criminal ever to live on planet Earth. Pablo was a poor man born in a poor country, but ended up being one of, if not the richest man on planet Earth. His lucrative distribution of adult sugar in the 80s made him very wealthy. It also made him very dangerous, as he was willing to do whatever to get his way. Extortion, bribing, bombing, just about anything you can think of. Oh yeah, he was one bad dude. He had so much money that he had to bury it all over Colombia. Every once in a while, some of his buried treasure pops up. And as much as I want a quick million in US cash, I'll just put it back where it came from. Oh, Dios mío, lo siento, Pablo. Number 3. Al Capone. Another ruthless criminal, and honestly, Capone walked so gangsters like Pablo could run. Part of the ruthless Italian mafia that was the outfit, Capone worked his way through the ranks during 1920s Prohibition America, earning millions in his time where really just $100 could stretch a long way. Capone is noted for his violent behavior throughout his life and the many accidents he caused directly or indirectly. Prohibition and the Depression were hard times for a lot of folks in America. However, the media and the people of Chicago at first always wanted to see what the lavish gangster was up to, as his criminal life became somewhat publicized. Most likely due to his wealth. The dude was rich. He eventually would get arrested and sent to Alcatraz, which was probably the worst prison in America, or the best Call of Duty Zombies map, depending on how you look at things. I look at things through a Call of Duty way, so Number 2, Gavrilo Princip. That might not be a name that you're familiar with, but it was the man who unalived Franz Ferdinand, which started World War I, which caused World War II, which caused the Cold War, which caused the collapse of Soviet Russia, and it's why you live in a post-war globalist world with markets developing rapidly in the cyber world. Except maybe the whole thing in Ukraine, watch out for that. Kinda crazy to think how all that could come from one wrong turn and a guy seizing an opportunity. But this also means he's kind of responsible, in a way, for all the bad stuff that happened in those times as well. So maybe don't seize the day, I'm not sure. Just don't be ruthless criminals, guys. Watch our videos instead. Although I could blame them for failing my math test in high school. Yeah, we'll go with that. Number 1, Mao Zedong. I'd like to come out here and tell you all about the chairman of China, but that simply is just too hot for TV, and if it's too hot for TV, it's too hot for YouTube. Basically, he was the dictator of communist China and is responsible for many lives lost. It's estimated to be somewhere in the range of 60 to 80 million people. Whoa! Dude was down bad, the definition of down bad, and although many were told to adore him, there's still a great many people who remember the terrible things he's done. From Beijing to Hong Kong, there's not a person around who doesn't know who he is. If being a no good, rotten person was an Olympic sport, he would have gold medals coming out of his ears.